Good morning, and let's try this video again. Yesterday, my cats were insane, and actually, right now, I feel like it may not be much better. I don't know what is going on. Today's video is going to be hopefully short, but I just wanted to share something with you. It's really important to understand the more and more research I do on understanding hypervigilance and the role that toxic chronic stress plays, the more I am convinced that people are living in very unhealthy relationships and frankly engaging in ways that are very unhealthy for our nervous systems and therefore our minds and bodies and may not know it. I was listening to sort of a podcast talking about epigenetics, which is basically about how our genes get turned off or on based on our environment. So we have this nature and nurture experience, right? They're not directly passed down, but something like, for example, the children of Holocaust survivors had higher stress levels and things like that. We know that even self-harm can have an epigenetic component to it in terms of certain biomarkers. And here's a great way to think about this. And I just want to talk about it quickly and then give you some things to think about, hopefully, to help understand yourself. They did a study where they took mice and they blasted them with an electric shock and paired that with the smell of cherries. So much so that, of course, when the mice began to smell the cherry smell, they became, they cowered and were afraid of being shocked. In their children, the pups that came afterwards, who were never exposed to the electric shock, these pups were actually very afraid of the smell of cherries. So they had, through the environmental transmission and genetic transmission, become afraid of the smell of cherries, right? And so when they smelled it, they would cower. The same thing happened in the third generation of baby mice. And so though it can essentially be an infinite transmission of something like trauma or hardship, things like that, we know that early trauma and chronic stress are particularly impactful in terms of genetics. And so what I want you to think about is every time you notice you are being hypervigilant, you're essentially smelling cherries, right? If you had a childhood where it was constantly unpredictable for one reason or another, the parent's mood or mind, as I've talked about, the parent's temperature, the parent's mood determine the temperature in your home, you learn to scan and to be emotionally and behaviorally and relationally and physically hypervigilant. So everything from your startle response to reading faces, tone of voice shifts, subtle eye movements, to making meaning out of everything. That is essentially you becoming an expert in the smell of cherries. And the problem is we need hypervigilance to survive to a certain extent. But when it is chronic, it becomes persistent. It's no longer just a reaction to help, save us our lives. Like, oh my God, there's a lion, tiger, or bear. What am I going to do? It becomes the what I call the lens or sort of the identity of who we are. It's often couched in, oh, I'm an anxious person, but essentially you are looking and smelling for cherries all of the time. And I've talked about this with my kids where it's like, because I'm such a massive mood detector, I believe both from my brain and the way I was born as well as my childhood and adulthood trauma, that it's like the minute I detect the subtlest moodiness, it means something, and my first go-to is what's wrong, and are you mad at me, or are you upset with me? This has gotten a lot better over the years, but I realized how overly attuned I was at smelling the cherries of any mood shifts in my home. And my kids have said to me, Mom, you can't fix everything, or Mom, this has nothing to do with you. And yet it can be so impactful. And I do believe when you have a more hyper-empathic, highly sensitive, potentially neurodivergent brain, that is turned on and you're taking in everything, not just those subtle tone of voice and mood shifts, but everything about that environment, and often being flooded and not knowing what to do with it. So for today's video, I just want you to think about how often as you go through today to try to notice how many times, how much, especially if you had a complicated childhood, that you are scanning for cherry smells and making meaning, and how often that meaning comes back to you. Even if you know up here, I always say to patients, it's not the thing that is, that applies. In here, it can feel like, I know, but something's wrong. And the way you might notice hypervigilance, it might be like I'm saying in heart palpitations or like a sinking feeling in your stomach, a headache, any of those things. We talk about the gut, feeling it in the gut microbiome, right? Feeling like, oh, I just feel yucky inside, something is wrong. To start to notice that you do that. And before you respond, before you immediately go to the person and say, what's wrong with you? Are you mad at me? Did I do something wrong? Or you start reorienting your whole day around trying to be a pleaser and making them okay. I want you to just try to notice it and notice it in your body. Where do I feel this? And what is the story I'm creating? Remember, polyvagal theory there are some issues with polyvagal theory, but in essence, this idea of, hold please, there goes Coco. In essence of our vagus nerve, which travels from our brain all the way down through our gut, that this is where we find that those sort of sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system responses, that it's just happening like that. And so one of the things I do like about polyvagal theory, it's not as hierarchical, at least so far in the research, as it talks about, but this idea that story follows state. Meaning that whatever state you feel, if you're in hypervigilance, for example, and you're in this fight or flight, and you notice that your kid or your partner or your boss is moody, you automatically, your brain needs a story. And if you had a certain childhood, it's even more likely that the story is, I did something wrong, they're mad at me, I'm in trouble, things like that. And then also, I believe we were often trained to do something about it, to help the parent with their big feelings, to be a best friend or whatever, to soothe that. And as I've said in many videos, I think many of us therapists were raised to regulate adults, and that is what we do for our job. And that has a plus side and a downside, right? And so I think it's part of why we can sit with people in their greatest discomforts. Many of us have been doing that our entire lives, or anyone in any helping profession, really, nurses, doctors, PTs, all of those things. But the point is to understand that you're smelling cherries, to pause, to notice it in your body, ask yourself, what's the automatic story I'm coming up with? To pause and do nothing with it in the meantime. Not confront the person, not say anything. And then I want you to, if you're willing to do something with your body, to ideally take a walk if you can. A 15-minute walk, a 30, 45, even better. But to pause and to walk. Walk around your house, get on your treadmill, do an exercise video. Sure, things like yoga and meditation, and I love all of those too, but I would do those after. Moving your body, as I keep saying too, is, I believe, one of the best ways to really deal with your mental and physical health. So pause, get that energy, those thoughts out, whatever it is. Don't respond to the person. Then maybe consider writing it out, journaling, talking about it to yourself, putting it in your computer. Ideally, we know that writing it out is best if you can, but if not, if you just want to put it in your phone and type it and then erase it, go ahead. This idea is to purge it out, to reflect on what else could the story be before you do anything. And then you may decide, you know what, those are their feelings, and I know that they're nothing to do with me. I'm going to leave it alone. You might decide to check in and say, hey, earlier today I noticed that you seemed a little off, or you're not feeling okay. Just checking on you. I'm here if you need me, as opposed to what's wrong and how do I fix it, right? How do I fix it is often the source of us smelling those cherries and then being responsible for solving every issue related to them. And so just as a quick example, in my hypervigilance course, I talk about eggshell relationships. This idea that when you grow up walking on eggshells, you really do often cultivate this extreme cherry expertise. And so everything from, a parent being emotionally or relationally or behaviorally unpredictable, expressing unpredictable thoughts or communicating in ways, whether it's a silent treatment or screaming at you, and then often lacking validation and repair and empathy skills. This is the hallmark of having a childhood like this. And this really loads you up to spend your life more focused on what do I do about everyone else's cherries instead of focusing on yourself. And part of these exercises are helping you turn inward and to stop distracting yourself and neglecting yourself with your hyper focus on everyone else. So notice it, observe it, pause, take a walk, journal, and then decide what you want to do with it. So that's it for today's video. Have a beautiful day. And I don't know if you watched the White Lotus episode, season 3, episode 4 last night. Oh my God, I was laughing so hard in the beginning. I could not stop laughing at the Ratliff family. So, talk about a very interesting family to talk about in terms of like psychopathology and narcissism. It is just chef's kiss. Mike White is just doing a great job of writing all of the different dynamics. And I absolutely love Amy Wood's character with Walton Goggins. That's my favorite little dyad there. And then, of course, the three women, Leslie Bibb, Carrie Coon, and Michelle Monaghan are also just amazing. So anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts about the White Lotus episode if you just happen to want to share that too. And I'll be posting my new Substack on Thursday this week. All right. Thanks so much. Have a good day. I'll see you soon. Bye.